Hi, I'm Joe Fox from Fox Media Lab. I'm going to be initiating a channel with regard to communication technologies, going back to communication fundamentals and extending into digital or the technologies of communications. Some of the things that I'll be talking about are the state of interpersonal communications, which is study 8.12. Merging of man and machine, which is study C10G5, encompassing communications, which is a generalized discussion on communications at large with regard to verbal, written, and contexts of communications. Transaction as a communication is a study that we're doing, and we consider transactions, even though some people might call it commerce or some other general industry or business category, we consider it a communication. Privacy, accountability, and security is study SA4. Algorithms and prognostications. You're going to love this. This is a lot of fun because it deals with science and gaming. And when I mean gaming, I don't mean just the game consoles. I mean gambling as in gaming, and how algorithms and prognostications are used in fantasy, rotisserie baseball, and all kinds of sports gambling. It's interesting. Another status report and study we're doing is evolving digital communications, which will have ongoing updates talking about what is going on with digital communications at large, which is a lot nowadays. Also, there'll be a discussion on digital modes, which is DM101, which is a status and a study, and I'll talk about the various methods of communications digitally, to include streaming, file formats, and language, coding, printing, and all of those types of issues. We have another study, C303, called Communication Swarming, which talks about viral communications and the tipping points that something does in fact go viral and become a juggernaut, or what we call juggernauting, communicative juggernauting. Communication reinforcement is related to advertising, but it also speaks about the means of various organizations that use digital and other forms of communication to reinforce their perspectives or point of view. That's C.204, and that is a status report. History as a communication construct, which is deals with, in this study, is C404OG, and it has to do with the relativity of communications, how communications are relative to a historical construct. What is holding to be true, and obviously how it affects current events from past events that have already happened. Study and a status report is C106OG, and it's communication rights, and we talk about the individual communication rights, the state communication rights. And when I say state, it could be countries or any other governmental concern. And then, obviously, organizational communication rights. And I'm presenting these general discussions that we're going to have because of existing study that we've been doing ongoingly. However, if you have specialized or specific things with regard to communications, and that whether it be interpersonal, mass communications, or digital communications, please put it in your comments, and I'll address each and every one of those. and perhaps if we start to see some trends, I can come out and we can discuss some of the more pressing subject matters. Another study that we're doing, C2, is information or which is / news communications, which discusses information, misinformation, and then also the valuing of sources. If you're noticing, a lot of these studies do mesh with one another, and various subject matter can be used in a number of the different studies and status reports and applications that we're creating. Vetting communications or research, C105, is a status and an application. Communications management, which gets into content distribution, content management systems, filing, databases, and security. We touch on security on that, and that's C2.055. It is an industry and industry study. Another industry study, C208, is mobile communications, dealing with geolocation, cashless society devices, and a lot of computing on the go. In communications, let's face it, all of these devices represent communication in some form. C105 is a status report for central communication networks and modes. We get into existing modes such as satellite, GPS, television, white space, emergency systems, and existing networks and their modes, as well as ones that we anticipate happening in the near future. That, once again, is C105, central communication networks and modes. Contract communications is a very highly specialized communication discussion that we will have that talks about general categories, and it gets into protections as well as patents and copyrights and things of that nature. Since so much has been happening in the world, we decided to do a discussion, C106.02, which is a status and a study on emergency communications dealing with disaster communications specifically. It seems like nary every week there is a major event requiring worldwide attention and emergency help. And we discussed the various communication tools that are used, from everything from a backpacker right through, or a mountain climber not getting lost, right through aiding people in a tsunami or a hurricane. Eventually we get to social networks. Not a big, one of my favorite subjects, because I think there's a lot of things happening in that aren't good. And that's A205, and that's a status report that is updated ongoingly. We have a discussion with movies, videos, communications. It gets into entertainment and messages, ostensible messages, as well as subliminal and other messages that are embedded in movie and video communication content. I call this, the next one is F501. It's a status and study report called Spy Communications. This gets into a lot of the NSA, FSA, a lot of governmental organizations, but also corporations that are using communications that would, in many cases, would be considered illegal, and that is why they are in fact clandestine. Although nowadays it seems like a lot of these spy communications are openly admitted. Moving on, F5011 is a status in a study called Communication Translations. It gets into languages, as in languages of different people from different countries, but also languages as in digital languages that have code and specific parameters that you communicate under. We have an ongoing study. In fact, it's our longest standing study, which is C409, is a study on communication waves' effect on the physiology of humans. What's happening with all these microwaves, satellite waves, electrical waves, X-rays going through our bodies and our brains, and what's happening to us as a human race as a result of that. Another subject, and please respond and let me know some of the things that you'd like to talk about more readily, is advertising communications, which is C103.1 and is a status report. And it talks about communications. It's kind of dry, and you know, I like to approach things from a scientific approach, and advertising and communications is really not that as scientific as they might like to think, because they're trying to, even though that they'll show research on response rates and things like this, it's affecting people on a primal means, and but we can talk about that. Also, we get into the more advanced ones of nonverbal communications of C1027, which is a status report, and one of my favorites, quantum communications, which is C107, and is a status report which gets into where I see the greatest opening in communications in general, the metaphysical and the spiritual communication. And is related to, in fact, the separate status report of nonverbal communications. But that's just a few ideas. We have some others, but I wanted to bring some out. And we're at 12 minutes, so I want to just call it an end. My name is Joe Fox. I'm with Fox Media Lab. I'd like to discuss these topics. I will always keep them, I will try to keep them to 8 minutes or less, so that they're little vignettes for you to use in your personal life or professional life. Thank you, and have a good day.